Hello, today we'll do the lesson The Homecoming by Rabindranath Tagore. So, it says Patik Chakravarti was ringleader among the boys of the village. A new mischief got into his head. So, Patik Chakravarti is a boy who lives in a village. In the village, there are a number of boys, and he was ringleader. That is, the boys they formed a gang, and they went about the village doing mischief. So he was ringleader among the boys of the village, and now what happens is a new mischief got into his head. He took it into his head that he wanted to do something. There was a heavy log lying in the mud flat of the river, waiting to be shaped into a mast for a boat. So, in the river, when it is low tide, when the water recedes from the shore, it leaves a mud flat. And in the mud flat, there was a heavy log, a heavy tree trunk lying in the middle of the mud flat. And that log should be could be shaped into a mast for a boat. A mast is the place where the sails are held for the boat. He decided that they should all work together to shift the log by main force from its place and roll it away. So Patik Chakravarti decided that all the boys should get together, they should work together to move the log by force, by brute force, by roll to roll it away from the mud flat. The owner of the log would be angry and surprised, and they would all enjoy the fun. So the owner of that log lying in the mud flat would be angry because his log would have been taken away by the boys, and they would, but he wouldn't know who had rolled it away. So they would all enjoy the fun of everyone seconded the proposal, and it was carried unanimously. All the boys supported Patik in this enterprise, and all of them decided together to carry out the plan. But just as the fun was about to begin, Makan, Patik's younger brother, sauntered up and sat down on the log in front of them all without a word. So Makan is Patik's younger brother, and he walks up in a relaxed manner and sits down on the log without saying a single word. The boys were puzzled. For a moment, he was pushed rather timidly by one of the boys and told to get up, but he remained quite unconcerned. So one of the boys just gives him a nudge and tells him to move, but Makan remains rather unconcerned. He appeared like a young philosopher meditating on the futility of games. So Makan was a rather studious young boy, and he sits there, seems to be meditating about the uselessness or futility of games. Patik was furious. Makan, he cried, if you don't get down this minute, I'll thrash you. So Patik threatens Makan that he will thrash him. Makan only moved to a more comfortable position. So Makan doesn't react at all. He lies down even more comfortable. Now Patik was to keep his regal dignity before the public. it was clear he ought to carry out his threat. So Patik is the leader. He should do what he says. He should thrash Makan. Otherwise, his dignity would be lost. His position of leadership would be lost if he didn't carry out his threat, his regal dignity, his kingly dignity as leader of the voice. But his courage failed him at the crisis. So Patik doesn't becomes less courageous when it comes to thrash Makan. He, his fertile brain, however, rapidly seized upon a new maneuver which would discomfit his brother and afford his followers an added amusement. But however, his mind was active, his brain, his fertile brain, came up with an idea and he thought of a new maneuver, he thought of a new plan which would make his brother uncomfortable, which would make him feel discomforted and afford the boys of the village, Patik's followers, an added amusement. He gave the word of command to roll the log and Makan over together. So he told the boys to roll the log with Makan on it. Makan heard the order and made it a point of honor to stick on. So Makan becomes stubborn. He makes it a point of honor to stay on the log. But he overlooked the fact, like those who attempt earthly fame or in other matters, that there was peril in it. But what Makan had not foreseen, was the peril or the danger in staying on the log. He was just like others who attempt to do something great on the earth. He overlooks the danger inherent in the enterprise. The boys began to heave at the log with all their might, calling out, "One, two, three, go." So all the boys come together and push at the log. They heave at the log, and on the count of three, they all push together. As for at the word go, the log went, and with it, Makan's philosophy, glory, and all. So at the word go, all the boys pushed together. The log gave way. Makan, who was sitting on the log, fell down, and Makan's philosophy of the futility of games went into the mud. All the other boys shouted themselves hoarse with delight. So all the boys became lost in almost lost their voices, shouting with delight at what had happened. But Patik was a little frightened. He knew what was coming. Patik knows what will happen next. He knew what was coming enough. And sure enough, Makan rose from Mother Earth, blind as fate and screaming like the Furies. So Makan rose from the mud, Mother Earth, and he became furious and he was screaming with his anger and he was blind as fate at what he was going to do. He rushed at Patik and scratched his face and beat him and kicked him. So Makan becomes really furious. He charges at Patik and screaming, he scratches Patik's face and beat him and kicked him and then went home crying. The first act of the drama was over. Patik wiped his face and sat down on the edge of a sunken barge on the riverbank. So there was a barge which had sunk and the water had receded because it was low tide. Patik went down and sat down on the edge of the barge or boat. and began to chew a piece of grass. A boat came up to the landing, and a middle aged man with grey hair and dark moustache stepped on shore. So, a boat comes up to the place where the passengers get off, and a middle aged man with grey hair and dark moustache stepped on shore. He saw the boy sitting there doing nothing and asked him where the Chakravartis lived. Patik went on chewing the grass and said, "Over there." But it was quite impossible to tell where he pointed. So he points at a place where the Chakravartis were supposed to live, but it was impossible to know exactly where because he points in a general direction. The stranger asked him again. He swung his legs to and fro from the side of the barge and said, "Go and find out," and continued to chew the grass as before. But now a servant came down from the house and told Patik his mother wanted him. So a servant comes down from Patik's house and tells Patik his mother wanted to see him. Patik refused to move, but the servant was a master on the key. So Patik was stubborn. He doesn't want to go and see his mother because he knows his mother will be angry. But the servant was master. He knew what to do. He took Patik up roughly and carried him, kicking and struggling in impotent rage. So the servant picks up Patik bodily. Patik kicks and screams and struggles in impotent rage means that his anger is quite without any result. When Patik came into the house, his mother saw him. She called out angrily, "So you've been hitting Makan again?" Patik answered indignantly, "No, I haven't. Who told you that?" His mother shouted, "Don't tell lies, you have." Patik said suddenly, "I tell you I haven't. You asked Makan." But Makan thought it best to stick to his previous statement. He said, "Yes, mother, Patik did hit me." So Makan has complained to his mother that Patik has hit him, and his mother has become furious. Patik's patience was already exhausted. He could not bear this injustice. So he knows that he hasn't hit Makan. Makan has lied, and his mother has become angry because of Makan's lies. So Patik could not bear the injustice. He asked, at, he rushed at Makan and hammered him with blows. "Take that and that and that," for telling lies. So Patik hits him. His mother took Makan aside in a moment, pulled Patik away, beating him with her hands. When Patik pushed her aside, she shouted out, "Why, what, you little villain? Would you hit your own mother?" So Patik, in his anger, he hits out his own mother, and his mother becomes furious. It was just at this critical juncture that the grey-haired stranger arrived. The stranger who'd stepped on the boat appeared at this critical moment. He asked what the matter was. Patik looked sheepish and ashamed. So Patik becomes very timid after his anger has been given expression. But when his mother stepped back and looked at the stranger, her anger was changed to surprise. For she recognized her brother and cried, "Why, Dada, where have you come from?" As she said these words, she bowed to the ground and touched his feet. Her brother had gone away soon after she had married, and he had started business in Bombay. His sister had lost her husband while he was in Bombay. So Patik and Makan, and they don't have a father. And while their uncle was in Bombay, their father had died. Bishambar had now come back to Calcutta and had at once made inquiries about his sister. He had then hastened to see her as soon as he found out where she was. The next few days were full of rejoicing. The brother asked after the education of the two boys. He was told by his sister that Patik was a perpetual nuisance. Patik was endlessly a nuisance. He was lazy, disobedient, and wild. But Makan was as good as gold, as quiet as a lamb, and very fond of reading. Bishambar kindly offered to take Patik off his sister's hands and educate him with his own children in Calcutta. The widowed mother readily agreed. When his uncle asked Patik if he'd like to go to Calcutta with him, his joy knew no bounds. So Patik becomes extremely happy when he's going to leave his house and he's going to go to Calcutta. He said, "Oh yes, uncle," in a way that made it quite clear that he meant it. It was an immense relief to the mother to get rid of Patik. She had a prejudice against the boy, and no love was lost between the two brothers. So between Patik and Makan, there was no sense of affection. She was in daily fear that he would either drown Makan someday in the river, or break his head in a fight, or run him into some danger or the other. So Patik's mother was afraid that Makan would get into some trouble because of Patik. At the same time, she was somewhat distressed to see Patik's extreme eagerness to get away. But so at the same time, Patik's mother was sad to see Patik so happy to get away from her. Patik, as soon as all was settled, kept asking his uncle every minute when they were to start. He was on pins and needles all day long with excitement. So he was very excited and lay awake most of the night. He bequeathed to Makan in perpetuity his fishing rod, his big kite, and his marbles. So he gave to Makan, he willed to Makan forever in perpetuity his belongings, his fishing rod, his big kite, and his marbles. Indeed, at the time of his departure, his generosity towards Makan was unbounded. So, because he was so glad of leaving, he gave Makan everything that he owned. When they reached Calcutta, Patik made the acquaintance of his aunt for the first time. She was by no means pleased with the unnecessary addition to the family. So Patik's aunt, that is Uncle Bishamba's wife, was not happy that Patik was coming into the family. She found her own three boys quite enough to manage without taking anyone else. So she found it quite hard to manage her own three children without taking on Patik in addition. And to bring a village lad of 14 into their midst was terribly upsetting. So to bring a village boy of 14 years was terribly upsetting. Bishamba should really have thought twice before committing such an indiscretion. So Uncle Bishamba should really have thought over the matter before committing such a mistake. In this world of human affairs, there was no worse nuisance than a boy at the age of 14. So, at the age of 14, boys are quite mischievous. He was neither ornamental nor useful. He was neither ornamental, that is, he was not a child who could be exhibited, nor was he useful because he was not old enough to work, that is, a boy of 14. It is impossible to shower affection on him as a little boy, and he's always getting in the way. So, a boy of 14 is always getting in the way. If he talks with a childish lisp, he's called a baby, and if he answers as a grown up, he's called impertinent. So if his voice breaks, he's called a baby, and if the 14-year-old boy answers in an adult manner, he's called impertinent or rude. He, in fact, any talk at all from him is resented. So he should not talk. A boy of 14 should not talk. He should keep quiet. Then he is and then he is at the unattractive growing age. So he's not yet a boy and he's not yet a man. So he's still growing. He grows out of his clothes with indecent haste. His voice grows hoarse and breaks and quavers. His face grows suddenly angular and unsightly. So all his physical features change. He is still unattractive. Grows out of his clothes very quickly. His voice becomes rough and breaks and and quavers. Quavers means it goes up and down, and his face becomes angular and unsightly. It is easy to excuse the shortcomings of early childhood. It's hard to tolerate even unavoidable lapses in a boy of 14. So, easy to forgive a boy who's still a child, but it's hard to tolerate a growing up boy. The lad himself becomes painfully self conscious. When he talks with elderly people, he's either unduly forward or else so unduly shy that he appears ashamed of his very existence. So, a boy of 14 is still not an adult, and when he talks with his elders, he's either unduly oh, rude or else he's so shy that he seems to be sad at his very existence. Yet it is at this very age when in his heart of hearts a young lad most craves for recognition of love, and he becomes the devoted slave of anyone who shows him consideration. So when he's 14, uh, a boy desires recognition and love, and when anyone shows him the least consideration, then he becomes their slave. But none dare openly love him, for he would be regarded as undue indulgence, and not and therefore bad for the boy. So no one dares to show him uh, undue love because that would spoil him. So what with scolding and chiding, he becomes very much like a stray dog that has lost his master. So a young boy of 14 who is treated like this, who is scolded and beaten, he becomes very much like a stray dog that has lost its master. For a boy of 14, his own home is the only paradise. So, his own home is a heaven for a boy of 14. To live in a strange house with strange people is a little short of torture, wherein the height of his bliss is to receive the kind looks of women and never to be slighted by them. So, for a boy of 14, uh, it is a height of bliss, height of happiness to receive kind looks from a woman, and never be scolded by them. It was anguish to Patik to be the unwelcome guest in his aunt's house, despised by this elderly woman and slighted on every occasion. So, on every occasion that presented itself, Patik's aunt would scold him and she would slight him, and so it became a thing of anguish or pain and torture. If she ever asked him to do anything for her, he would be so overjoyed that he would overdo it, and then she would tell him not to be so stupid but to get on with his lesson. So, whenever she asked him to do anything for her, he'd become extremely happy. He would do it to such a pitch of perfection that she would tell him not to overdo it and tell him to get on with his lessons. The cramped atmosphere of neglect in his aunt's house oppressed Patek so much that he felt he could hardly breathe. So he thought he couldn't stay in his aunt's house any longer. He could hardly breathe because he was so cramped, he was so contained and controlled in his aunt's house. He wanted to go out into the open country and fill his lungs and breathe freely with air. But there was no open country to go to. Surrounded on all sides by Calcutta houses and walls, he would dream night after night after his village home and long to be back there. He remembered the glorious meadow where he used to fly his kite all day long, the broad river banks where he would wander about the livelong day, singing and shouting for joy, the narrow brook where he could go and dive and swim at any time he liked. So he remembers his country house. He thought of his band of boy companions over whom he was despot, and above all the memory of that tyrant mother of his who had such a prejudice against him occupied him day and night. So his mind becomes totally occupied with thoughts of his home, with thoughts of his band of boys, and with thoughts of his mother who was so cruel. Kind of physical love like that of animals, a longing to be in the presence of the one who is loved, an inexpressible wistfulness during absence, a silent cry of the inmost heart for the mother, like lowing of a cock in the twilight. This love, which was almost an animal instinct, agitated the shy, nervous, lean, uncouth, and ugly boy. So he remembers his home and a kind of physical love, like that. It's a longing to be in the presence of one who is loved, and he experiences an inexpressible feeling during his absence for his mother, like it's like the feeling of a calf in the evenings. So this love, which was almost an animal instinct, uh, enveloped the shy need, being thin, uncouth, and ugly boy. No one could understand it, but it preyed upon him continually. There was no more backward boy in the whole school than Pratik. So there was no boy who was more dull than Pratik. He gaped and remained silent when the teacher asked him a question. Like an overlaid lass, patiently suffered all the blows that came down on his back. So he opened his mouth wide and stared at the teacher whenever the teacher asked him like a question. And when the teacher gave him blows on his back, he, he bore those blows like an overladen donkey or ass. When the other boys went out to play, he stood wistfully by the window and gazed at the roofs of the distant houses. And if by chance he spied children playing on open terrace of any roof, his heart would ache with longing. So if he saw any children playing on open terrace, his heart would ache with longing to play. One day he summoned up all his courage and asked his uncle, Uncle, when can I go home? His uncle answered, Wait till the holidays come. But the holidays would not come till November, and there was a long time still to wait. One day Patek lost his lesson book. Even with the help of books, he had found it very difficult indeed to prepare his lesson. Now it was impossible. Day after day, the teacher would come, cane him mercifully. So one day he lost his lesson book, and it became more difficult for him to prepare his lesson. And the teacher caned him unmercifully without mercy. His condition became so abjectly miserable that even his cousins were ashamed to own him. Then he began to jeer and they began to jeer and insult him more than the other boys. So even his own cousins, the three children of Bishambar, began to insult him. He went to his aunt at last and told her he had lost his book. His aunt pursed her lips in contempt and said, You great clumsy country lout, how can I afford with all my family to buy a new book 5 times a month? So she scolds him, she calls him a country bumpkin, and she asks him how she can afford to buy a new book 5 times a month. That night, on his way back from school, Patik had a bad headache with a fit of shivering. He felt he was going to have an attack of malarial fever. His one great fear was that he would be a nuisance to his aunt. The next morning, Patik was nowhere to be seen. All searches in the neighborhood proved futile. The rain had been pouring in torrents all night, so it had been raining heavily all night, and Patik could not be found. And those who went out in search of the boys got drenched through to the skin. So those who went out in search of Patik became soaked to the skin in the rain. At last, Bishambhar asked help from the police. At the end of the day, a policeman stopped at the door before the house. It was still raining and the streets were all flooded. Two constables brought out Pratik in their arms and placed him before Bishambhar. He was wet through from head to foot, muddy all over his eyes, legs and eyes, flushed with fever and his limbs all trembling. So Pratik had got caught in the rain and he developed a high fever. And Vishwambar carried him in his arms and took him to the inner apartments. When his wife saw him, she exclaimed, "What a heap of trouble this boy's given us. Hadn't you better send him home?" Pratik heard her voice and shouted out loud, "Uncle, I was just going home, but they dragged me back again." The fever rose very high, and all that night the boy was delirious. His mind becomes swimming, his mind swims with fever. He becomes delirious. Vishamba brought him a doctor. Patik opened his eyes, flashed with fever, and looked up to the ceiling and said vacantly, "Uncle, have the holidays come? May I go home?" Vishamba wiped the tears from his own eyes and took Patik's lean and burly hands in his own and sat by him through the night. The boy began to mutter. At last his voice became excited. "Mother," he cried, "don't beat me like that, mother, I'm telling you the truth." So in his mind, in his feverish mind, Patik is remembering his mother. The next day Patik became conscious for a short time. So he recovers his mind for a short time. He turned his eyes about the room as if expecting someone to come. At last, with an active air of disappointment, his head sank back on the pillow. He turned his face to the wall with a deep sigh. So, Vishamba knew his thoughts and bending down his head, whispered, "Patik, I sent for your mother." The day went by. The doctor said in a troubled voice that the boy's condition was very critical. Patik began to cry out, "By the mark, 3 fathoms, by the mark, 4 fathoms, by the mark." So what he's thinking of in his feverish mind is getting the depth of the river in his hometown. So fathom is a measure of the depth of the water of a river. Uh, Now he was himself plumbing an unfathomable sea. So Patik's mind has really become weak and he's remembering all the happiness that he had in his hometown. Later in the day, Patik's mother burst into the room like a whirlwind and began to toss from side to side and moan and cry in a loud voice. So that day later, Patik's mother came. She came in like a whirlwind, like a tornado, and began to sway from side to side and began to moan and cry in a loud voice because she was afraid for her son. Vishamba tried to calm her agitation, but she flung herself on the bed and cried, "Patik, my darling, my darling." Patik stopped his restless movement for a moment. His hands ceased beating up and down. Said, "Hey?" The mother cried again, "Patik, my darling, my darling." Patik very slowly turned his head, and without seeing anybody, "Mother, the holidays have come." So Patik regains his happiness when he hears his mother's voice, and he regains the sanity of his mind, and um, he recovers himself in the end. So we see how Patik uh, almost loses his mind because of the lack of love shown to him in his own aunt's house. But eventually he probably recovers and goes home to his